Hello and welcome to Behind the Build, Iron Viz edition. My name's Archana Ganeshalingam. By day, I'm a program manager for Tableau Solution Engineering team. And by night, or at least by Tableau conference, I'm co-host of Iron Viz. Iron Viz is the world's largest data visualization competition. What began as a breakout session at Tableau conference back in 2011 has now grown into a global phenomenon and has become a core part of our data fan. 3 Iron Viz finalists take center stage and have 20 minutes to tell the most compelling story using the same data set. Just like the feeder competition leading up to it, contestants' Vizes are scored based on analysis, design, and storytelling. It's something you must see to truly understand. Today, we'll be going behind the scenes, where my co-host Andy Cotgreave and finalist Nirosh Perera will be watching his live build back and chatting through some key moments and decisions behind the final build. With that, it's over to you, Andy.
Okay, well, thanks, Archana. And here we go with Nirosh's build. Nirosh, what's it like revisiting the 20 minutes of joy from Iron Viz?
No, it's surreal. It's bringing back a lot of memories. Some good, some not so good. It was just very intense, a very intense period, as you might expect. Like, I'm watching this now thinking, oh, it's really slow, but trust me, it didn't feel slow in that moment. It's 100 miles an hour. But yeah,
it's nice. It's what was it like walking out on that stage? You know, we've done many dress rehearsals, but then on the day it's 6,000 people. What was that like?
I jumped the gun. I was so excited. Paul and Brittany were out there, and I heard the roar twice, and I was like, I need to feel that energy. Yeah. So I was a couple of seconds too quick, but I know. Apparently I started out. So yeah, it was an amazing moment. Definitely. I saw 2 of my colleagues. They had got some t-shirts with my face like glowing in the dark, so I could see them. That was a really, really nice moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an intimidating experience as a prize to look out in front of thousands of people, but well deserved. Well, let's look at the build here. So I can see already. Tell us about these early first few minutes. There's some parameters going on. What's going on in these first few minutes of the build?
Yeah, I mean, the setup was really important. I think initially I didn't really appreciate how long it would take to kind of just have stuff ready without creating marks. Like it was scary every time doing this. Like it's going to take about 5 minutes before I actually create anything. But all of this is to make my life easier towards the end. Setting up, I've already pre-formatted all the settings, and I've copied those settings 5 times over, so I don't have to. Because if you create a new sheet, it doesn't bring every preset with it. So that's why I've created the 5 duplicates for my 5 sections. And then it's just the classic of bringing calculated fields. And I actually learned this trick from watching it behind the viz for my previous finalist. So yeah, this is all just set up and making the rest of it simpler.
And in some ways, for those new to Iron Viz who maybe haven't seen Iron Viz before but are building their own Tableau workbooks in their business day job, in some ways this is kind of the inverted way of the way you'd normally explore and prepare a data set, right? Because you'd be throwing data at the canvas, see what happens, and then those calcs might come later. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, everything about well, not everything, but a lot about the Iron Viz is back to front. Like, even from the initial stages of understanding the story, usually you have a question in which you have to find an answer from a stakeholder. There's no stakeholder for the Iron Viz. It's just a presentation to an audience, and you need to find the question yourself. And I found that quite interesting. There's nothing to really guide me, and the data, I'm sure we'll get onto it. The data very interesting, but there's just any rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a little bit back to front. But
it's funny actually, because I disagree that there's no stakeholder. I think you've got 6,000 stakeholders and 3 very important stakeholders who we call the judges. But where I agree is you can't go and say, what would I show you to get maximum points? I get what you're saying. Now, so far it seems like you've built 5 worksheets, each with 1 word on them. Now, those of you who know the final build, they all become a single title. So what's going on here? Because you could have done this with buttons. Well, what are you doing, and what was the process of choosing that approach?
Sure. So I was really keen to leverage dynamic zone visibility in some way, shape, or form. It was just, in my opinion, a really exciting feature that was new for this year. And my initial thought, well, the thought that the angle I went with was to try and create a more original flow for the story, namely to start from a specific position and end somewhere completely different. So you'll see when we get to the end, I contrast the colors from basically being all black to ending on all white. And I wanted to use dynamic zone visibility for that. There was an element of that I couldn't incorporate because I wasn't able to build this in time in many of the iterations prior to the one we're watching.
Right.
So I wanted to be able to go to section 1 of my viz and then come back and have a call out from that section on the main screen. But that just required more zones, more dynamic, more parameter actions. So it was, and you just get so zoned into how you build this particular viz that it was harder for me to just unpick it and just use buttons than to just carry on going with the approach of.
I'm delighted you kept the approach and didn't unpick it. You know, I don't. Yeah, sorry if it wasn't the wrong thing to do. It was just one of those. I found it a really fascinating flourish that, you know, is part of an Iron Viz build. That, you know, I doubt you do that in a business dashboard, but this is Iron Viz. It's all good, right? Dynamic zones for that, again, for those watching, that's a newish feature of Tableau, which allows you to completely show and hide entire regions of dashboards or you know, visual displays that, again, built for analytical dashboards to bring in new slices of the view, but actually they're really powerful for storytelling because it was something Paul Ross used as well, and we've seen used extensively by the data fan.
Yes.
Tell me about scatterplots, because we're already going down that path, and you built quite a few of them.
I built a lot. I had a lot of discussion with my sous. My philosophy around dashboarding is fairly minimalist. Like, I like to keep things simple. I wanted to use simple chart types. Because it's not, to be quite frank, honestly, the amazing, crazy chart types are just not in my wheel arc, and I didn't feel the need to reinvent myself in order to compete in the final. And I had a debate with my sous about, can I just use scatterplots, just solely scatterplots, without necessarily making it obvious that I am. And I'm almost there. I basically use scatterplots throughout. I mean, a map is a scatterplot with a map behind it, essentially.
Yeah.
I just really like the amount that you're able to tell from essentially having two axes. It just gives you, I guess, the square of the amount of stuff you can communicate to the audience. So it's about simplicity and also just about using something that
I think that's fascinating. When I present to customers a lot, we sometimes find that people perceive what we do and what you do as a science, you know, and there's obviously a huge amount of engineering, understanding data structures, tools, code, and everything. But, you know, what you've just described is the art, right? You almost arbitrarily chose a constraint to do scatter plots and then continued that through the build. And we actually do that in business as well, right? You know, maybe not, I'm just going to use scatter plots, but you are using those creative choices along the way. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Now, your supervisor in Iron Viz made a big thing that this chart is a dynamic stacked animated something or other area chart. And again, and it looks like it's a line chart in the final build. So what are you building? And again, why go down the difficult route? And difficult routes are good.
I think we don't have a name for this chart, really. I mean, it's let's go with a line chart. It ends up being a line chart. I wanted to leverage animation at some point in the viz also. It was something in my entry that I think was really useful in getting me to the final. And so it was a bit of a nod to that. And yeah, I just felt it would help with my storytelling to show. So that line chart kind of shows the number of what I call temperature anomalies over time by region. And as I wanted to kind of go the Hans Rosling route and kind of try and explain key events in the year that gave rise to these anomalies across the world as those line charts were growing over time. So that was the idea.
Brilliant.
And actually, not that complicated to build. It's just leveraging the pages shelf, which is a really underrated feature in my opinion.
But the pages shelf has won many an Iron Viz because I think, as Jock McKinley said in the judging, animation brings the story to life, and I think you're dead right. And it's funny, it's an underrated feature, and yet it's been in Tableau since forever, I think. So yeah, great feature. So okay, what's happening here? Because we're seeing a lot of white space, but there's actually a lot of blue containers happening. You're doing padding. So you're building some scaffolding here. Tell me about how you built this layout.
Yeah, I think this part of the build is really for the Tableau purist. I really enjoyed it, setting everything up. It's all just with a view to having a homogeneous layering for each of my 3 sections. So I'm just building out. I just use the copy and paste feature of the containers, which we can do now, to essentially have those 3 sections look exactly the same in terms of the way they're padded.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I hadn't noticed you'd used copy and paste in the actual build. All right. Yeah. So again, new feature. You can right. So you'd set up a 3-section container, and then you repeated that multiple times. Is that what you did?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's 3 containers there's somewhere. You don't really need to worry about them after you copy and paste them. You can just deal with the one that's I snap this into place. Well, actually, I saw things floating. But they just sit somewhere, and then I can find it using the layout tab later, and then bring that into, well, I'm making it look like everything's tiled, but essentially with the dynamic zone visibility, you can kind of create these layers. So
yeah.
So
if people wanted to do these multi-layered layout containers things right now, you and I know you've now got about 15 layout containers here, but I can't see them. So any tips or tricks to help people keep track of them?
Good question. A lot of it comes down to understanding the item hierarchy. Like, I know from practice, to be honest, where which containers on that hierarchy are exactly, which ones are the ones that I'm going to be are kind of the skeleton, because they're literally they'll be the first ones in the hierarchy. Also, if a container is tiled, then it would also sit somewhere else in the hierarchy. I don't think that happens here. It's using that. You can also rename containers if you really want to. Obviously, in this, I would try and do that if I have time, but obviously in the 20-minute build, there was no time to rename anything, which is why you can see a lot of kind of duplicate sheets that are just numbers. To just help me with, give me some guidance. Like I didn't want to duplicate this. I have, I don't know, 16 sheets. I didn't want it to be 1 to 116. I changed the naming convention slightly, but as quickly as I could, just in order to save time.
That's great. Yeah, the item hierarchy and the object list, which you've just switched to here, and the hierarchy. I mean, that's transformed in the last sort of 5-6 years in Tableau, and it really gives you a load more power. Right now, so in Iron Viz Live, Archana and I made a joke that you appeared to be building the Luxor Pyramid, which is the hotel next to where we were. Obviously, we knew you weren't, but you are creating a uncommon chart type. So why were you choosing it? What is it showing? And also what you didn't get enough time to quite finish what you wanted. So give us the background on this chart.
Yeah, correct. I think the purpose really this is, so I'm building from the back to front. This section is really about drawing the audience back into the story and what they can do or what they can apply for my message to their life. So there were 3 major renewable energy sources that I found interesting, I guess. And my message there was based on the kind of weather conditions that exist within your city. What should you focus on? Is it solar? Is it wind? Is it what was the other one? Solar, wind, and oh gosh, that's really bad that I forgot the third.
I can't remember now either.
So the triangle, having those 3 different elements gave rise to the triangle. As you alluded to, the not a big mistake, a mistake. I didn't label my axes, which made me quite sad.
No, not at all. I mean, what do you call that chart type?
I call it a triangle chart, but I think it's got a lot of names.
I was writing notes on it. Is it a ternary chart?
Ternary chart.
I'm not entirely sure, but they are really good charts. But it's one of these classic tools you can have in your toolkit of charts, where it's a really powerful chart, adding an extra dimension and measure to a scatter plot to make a triangle. But then you have that challenge of how do you convey that story to an audience, how do you train them in a business environment so that they can read them. But I think, fair play for putting them on there, because it's a great way to compare three measures.
Yeah, well, thank you. I would say though that for people that are watching this with a view to getting advice for what to do in the final, 3 minutes, I mean, maybe not 3 minutes, it might be 3 minutes to explain, but 3 minutes to kind of tell your whole story is not enough. Not enough, but it's not a lot of time. And
it's not.
I don't regret anything, but I didn't have time to really hone in on that. And I think it didn't land as I kind of wanted it to, because I kind of just tried to squeeze too much in. So time management and understanding what you can achieve and having a coherent story that encompasses everything is probably better than trying to just cram in as much as you can and not having a clear thread that goes through A to B. Would be my key piece of advice about
good advice. Yeah. Concision in your presentations is always very difficult. How many times did you iterate the different font sizes and font families? I think font and colors are such intricate details with infinite creativity. Tell me about some of those choices.
To be honest, with both font and color, you're right. There are 1,000,001 decisions to make in this whole process. But two things that I didn't really spend that much time because I wanted to focus on other things were the font and the colors. I have a fairly monochromatic palette anyway. Yeah. And I really didn't want to go too far away from that aspect, and just keep the three colors as best I could. With the font, this was just a deliberation between me and my supervisor. I asked her about what fonts would sit well on Tableau server, and this was the best of the bunch.
Right, that's good enough. I find over my many 15 years of using Tableau, my design style has gotten. I professionally describe it as more pared back and minimalist. But I think really what I'm actually saying is I've got lazier and lazier, and I'll try and keep things change as few fonts as I possibly can, and colors. So now actually tell us about supervisors. So obviously with Iron Viz, you work with Alison, and she's kind of a support. But tell us about that experience. But how would you do that kind of thing in your business development of data and dashboards?
In terms of having some sort of helper to kind of guide.
Yeah, just bouncing ideas around.
Yeah. So I mean, just to touch on the supervisors in general, I think it's much more than technical, to be honest. Like from a emotional standpoint, I think you can't really share much of this with anybody else in the world.
Yeah,
they are probably the only person that really knows how you feel. And my supervisor Alison is a very kind and empathetic person. So it's really nice to form that relationship with somebody that is a stranger prior to that event. And yeah, I do this a lot, I would say, as part of my job to be more of technical support. Sharing. This is one of my things that I raised when I went back to work, is that it was hard for me not to share this with anybody, because I really appreciated as many eyes on it as possible to kind of iron out the kinks and just give a different opinion, because you kind of, time is so precious in the run up to, or the build up to the Iron Viz final, that you kind of go down, once you've picked a lane, you just go through it. You can't really turn back. So having the supervisor is of great help to kind of help you at least stay on that track. But yeah, I wish I could have shared a bit more. with the rest of it. But these are the rules.
Yeah. Now, tell us, while you were talking there was I've gone there. There was a bunch of dialog boxes. You were setting up parameter actions, right? Tell me, for people who maybe haven't used these, what's the power of those?
Yeah, so we're getting to the end of the build now, and this is kind of just going full circle. So I created the parameters to begin with that I didn't touch until this point. The words that I have on this page are essentially going to act as buttons to go access each of the zones or sections of my dashboard. And so with the parameters that I've created, they need to be connected to some sort of action, in this case a parameter action, in order for the button aspect to work. So I'm setting all of that up to ensure that the right buttons trigger the right access to the right zones. Again, it's just a case of remembering which sheets are up to which, and that's really what finishes. That's the last bit of the build, and I don't have time to check. So
yeah, parameter actions, dynamic zones. These are all incredibly powerful features that enable not just great Iron Viz storytelling, but also really rich data applications in your business environment. All right, Nirosh, this is where you'd finished, right? So what was it like with that final mouse move on stage? Was it a big sense of relief?
Yeah, absolutely, like huge. I can't really describe that moment when it is all over. It happens very quickly. Like you're waiting 6 months for this moment, and that 20 minutes just flies by, and then it's done. You step away and you wait, I guess. There's obviously still the 3 minutes of you speaking in front of 6,000 people, which remained in my mind, but it's a crazy moment for sure.
Yeah. Was it worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. Would I do it again? I'll think about it.
I deliberately didn't ask you if you do it again, but I'm glad you said it was worth it.
100%.
Maybe a once in a lifetime experience. Well, look, brilliant. Well, look, Nirosh, that was your build. Everybody who wants to see what the story was, you'll have to go check Iron Viz on Salesforce Plus. But thanks, Nirosh.
Pleasure.